The Tuesday my sister-in-law forgot to hang up, I heard her whisper 3 words that rewired 5 years of my life. I should have married him. I had told myself a story about loyalty, about harmless glances across a dinner table. That unintended murmur tore it in half. I sat in my truck, staring at the windshield, holding a confession that wasn't meant for me but changed everything. My name is David. I'm an HVAC technician, not a man who reads into things. For 5 years, I've watched my brother's wife, Jenna, look at me across dinner tables with an expression I couldn't name. I called it friendship. After that Tuesday, I couldn't anymore. I have a brother named Mark. Yes, Mark. Not his real name, but it fits the shape of him. He's 2 years older, the kind of man who walks into a room and assumes the center of gravity. He landed Jenna 6 years ago at a real estate mixer, and I remember thinking she was too perceptive for him. Not unkind, just true. She had this way of tilting her head when someone lied that made you want to confess things. Mark never noticed. That was always his talent, not noticing. Their wedding was a big, loud affair in my parents' backyard. White tents, string lights, a DJ with poor judgment. I gave a best man speech that was 2 parts sincerity and 1 part strategic omission. I'd written a line about how Mark had found someone who saw the best in people, but I cut it because I wasn't sure Jenna saw the best in him. I thought she saw the potential. That's a different thing entirely. She caught my eye as I sat down, and her smile was quick and private, like we'd shared a joke no one else would get. I filed it under new family affection and drove home at midnight with the radio off. The first 2 years, I saw them mostly at Sunday dinners. My parents' house, same roast chicken, same arguments about politics that went nowhere. Jenna would find me on the back porch sometimes, pretending to fix the screen door that didn't need fixing, and she'd stand with her arms folded and say something like, "You're either very dedicated to that hinge or very dedicated to avoiding the living room." I liked that she knew the difference. Once during a game of team trivia at Christmas, she leaned over to whisper an answer and her shoulder pressed against mine a beat longer than necessary. I shifted my weight, she straightened up, and neither of us mentioned it. I told myself it was the mulled wine talking. The thing is, I had evidence, but I was a man who fixed machinery for a living. I understood pressure, friction, heat, not the quiet mechanisms of a married woman's attention, so I made it into something manageable. She's just friendly. She's grateful I'm not a headache. She's stuck with Mark's family and I'm the safe one. That's a story you can live inside for years without checking the seams. Around year 3, Mark started working late more often. Not suspiciously late, he really does work long hours in commercial property management, but the effect was a slow drain on the marriage. Jenna mentioned it once at a barbecue while we were scraping plates. He's never home for bedtime. The kids ask for him, then they stop asking. I didn't know what to say. I was the uncle, not the husband. I handed her a clean spatula. She looked at me with that expression I couldn't name, and for 1 second I felt like a coward. Then she grabbed a dish towel and the moment passed. Year 4, my daughter was born. No, not mine, theirs. A little girl named Lily. Jenna asked me to be the godfather, and I said yes before she finished the sentence. At the christening, she handed Lily to me after the ceremony and said, "You're the one I'd trust if things ever went sideways." She walked away before I could ask what she meant. I held my niece and stared at the stained glass and pretended that sentence was only about emergency guardianship. Year 5, the cracks were visible from space. Mark and Jenna argued in low voices in my kitchen when they visited. Not shouting. Worse. The cold, surgical kind where every word has been rehearsed twice. I heard her say, "I can't keep doing all the emotional labor in this house." He said, "You knew who I was when you married me." I was outside the door holding a tray of cheese and crackers, feeling like an intruder in my own home. I backed up, made noise, and they went silent. Then came Tuesday. Jenna's voicemail was ordinary. "Hey, it's me. Could you grab that box of photos from your parents' attic? Mark wants them for some project, and I can't face your mom's questions this week. Call me back." I pulled over at a supply house, engine idling, and dialed. She answered on the second ring, sounding hollowed out. The kids had been sick, Mark was working late again, her car had a flat that morning. I listened the way you do for family. She asked about a relay switch for the furnace I'd repaired last winter. The conversation was mundane, warm, safe. Then she said, "I have to go. See you this weekend." I said, "Get some rest, Jenna." I heard the clatter, the set down, the silence. No disconnect tone. I waited, thumb hovering. And then her voice, soft and collapsing, a murmur not meant for anyone. "I should have married him." The silence that followed was brutal, broken only by a dripping faucet on her end. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I could hear my own pulse in the truck cab. Then the line went dead, and I was left alone with a sentence that rewrote every family dinner, every glance, every handoff of a child she'd placed in my arms. I had been telling myself a story about loyalty and friendship. The last page just turned out to be a confession I wasn't supposed to read. I don't know how long I sat there, engine idling, the phone still warm against my ear. The disconnect tone had come and gone, replaced by silence, and I couldn't lower my hand. My brother's wife had just murmured into a dead receiver that she should have married me. Not Mark, me. The man who fixed her furnace, who held her daughter at the christening, who ate her roast chicken every Sunday. The weight of that sentence pressed against my chest like a physical thing. I finally set the phone in the cup holder and stared through the windshield at the supply house parking lot. A man in a gray jacket walked past carrying a box of filters. He nodded. I didn't nod back. I was busy watching 5 years of family memories rearrange themselves into something unrecognizable. I'd been telling myself she was just friendly, that the glances across the dinner table were gratitude, not longing, that the way she touched my arm when she laughed was the casual warmth of a sister-in-law who was glad I existed. I'd constructed a whole architecture of innocence around us, and that one whispered sentence had brought it down like a condemned building. I thought about the wedding, the moment she caught my eye after the speech, that quick, private smile. I told myself it was solidarity. A fellow introvert in a room full of Mark's noise. Now I saw it differently. She'd looked at me like she was choosing something even then. A parallel future that shimmered beside the aisle she'd actually walked down. I thought about the Christmas trivia game, her shoulder against mine. The way she'd leaned in and stayed there, her breath warm on my neck. I'd shifted. She'd straightened. And neither of us had mentioned it. Because to mention it would have been to admit there was something to mention. We'd been two people in a silent agreement not to name the thing hovering between us. Now the thing had named itself. I thought about the christening. "You're the one I'd trust if things ever went sideways." I turned that sentence over in my mind for a year, eventually filing it under emergency guardianship. But she hadn't said if something happens to Mark. She'd said if things ever went sideways. Things. The marriage. The arrangement she'd built with her husband. She'd been looking at me as a contingency plan, and I'd been too determined to see loyalty instead of longing. My phone buzzed. Jenna's name lit up the screen. I stared at it through 4 rings, my thumb frozen. On the 5th, I answered. "Hello." My voice sounded normal. That surprised me. Her breath was uneven. "David." A pause. The call didn't hang up. I just looked at my phone. It stayed connected for almost a minute after I set it down. I said nothing. "Did you hear anything?" she asked, and her voice had a tremor I'd never heard before. Not weak, terrified. I could have lied. I could have said I'd already disconnected, that I didn't know what she was talking about. It would have been the cleaner choice. The one that preserved Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings and my brother's unexamined marriage. I opened my mouth to deliver that lie, and something else came out. Yes. The silence that followed was heavier than the one in the truck had been. I could hear her breathing. Then a small, sharp exhale that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so broken. "Oh God." Another silence. "How much?" "All of it," I said. 3 words. "I should have married him," she repeated, aloud this time, not a murmur but a confession offered to the man she'd just said it about. "That's what you heard." "That's what I heard." I heard her move through her house, a door closing, water running. Then her voice, quieter now, like she'd found a corner where no one could overhear. "I know this is going to sound like I'm making excuses, but I need you to know it wasn't about being unhappy in my marriage. Not exactly." She stopped. "I love Mark. I chose Mark, that's the truth, but choosing someone doesn't mean you stop seeing what you didn't choose." I stared at the steering wheel. "How long?" "I don't know." Her voice was barely audible. "Since the beginning, since before the beginning. I met you a month before I met Mark. Do you remember that?" I didn't. I searched my memory and came up blank. "What?" "A friend's party. You were standing by the door holding a drink you weren't drinking. I asked you what you did for a living and you said you fixed things that were supposed to be invisible. I laughed. You didn't smile all the way, just enough. And I thought, this is a man who doesn't perform for anyone. I'd never met anyone like that. She paused. You didn't ask for my number. You just said it was nice talking to me, and then you were gone. A month later, I met Mark at a real estate mixer. He was charming and loud, and he asked for my number 3 times before I gave it to him. I told myself that was what I wanted, someone who pursued me, someone who made it obvious. But I never stopped thinking about the man by the door who didn't perform. I couldn't speak. The memory was there now, faint but real. A dim apartment, a girl in a green dress. I'd thought she was beautiful. I'd also thought she was too sharp for someone like me, so I'd walked away. I didn't know you were brothers, she said. Not until the second date, when Mark mentioned his last name and I realized. I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself I could manage it, and I did, for 5 years. But some feelings don't disappear. They just go underground and wait for a moment of exhaustion to slip out through the cracks. So what do we do now? I asked. The question hung between us, raw and unanswerable. I don't know, she whispered, but I think we're past pretending. Can you come over before Saturday? We need to talk face to face. No phones, no accidental confessions, just the truth. I looked out the window at the supply house. The man in the gray jacket was loading his truck. My brother was probably at his desk right now, reviewing contracts, unaware that the ground beneath his marriage had just shifted. Yes, I said. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, she repeated. And then the line went dead, and I was alone with the knowledge that everything I'd told myself about loyalty, about family, about the clean lines of my life, was about to be rewritten. The line went dead, and this time I pressed the red button myself. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat and sat in the supply house parking lot until a delivery truck honked me out of my trance. I drove home on autopilot, my hands steering while my mind kept replaying the same loop. A dim apartment, a girl in a green dress, a conversation I'd forgotten had ever happened. She remembered it. After 5 years, a marriage and a child, she remembered what I was wearing and the exact shape of my not-quite smile. That meant something. Something I'd been refusing to name. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan's slow rotation, mapping the geography of every Sunday dinner I'd ever spent across from Jenna. The way she'd refill my coffee before anyone else's. The way she'd linger by the back porch, waiting for me to escape the living room. The way she'd hand me Lily without hesitation, like my arms were the safest place she knew. I'd cataloged each moment as innocent, but now I saw them for what they were, breadcrumbs leading directly to that Tuesday afternoon. At 7 the next morning, I texted Jenna. I'll be there at 10. She replied with a single word. Okay. The drive to their house took 40 minutes. Mark's car was gone, thank God. The kids would be at school. I parked on the street, wiped my palms on my jeans, and walked up the front steps of the house my brother had bought with his real estate money. The door opened before I knocked. Jenna stood in the doorway in faded jeans and an old sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked exhausted, like someone who'd been awake all night drafting an apology she'd never finish. She didn't smile. She stepped aside and I walked in. The living room was clean but hollow. No toys on the floor, no coffee cups on the table. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Jenna gestured toward the couch and I sat. She took the chair across from me, pulling her feet up beneath her. Thank you for coming, she said. You asked me to. I know. That doesn't mean you had to. She looked down at her hands. I've been thinking about what to say since I hung up last night. I've had 12 hours to prepare something that would make sense of what you heard, and I still have nothing. Then maybe don't prepare, I said. Just say it. She lifted her eyes. I meant it, every word. I should have married you. The sentence landed like a stone in still water. Not because I don't love Mark, I do. But because loving Mark has always felt like a compromise I made before I understood what I was giving up. You were the one who got away, except you never got away. You were at every family dinner, every holiday, every christening. I spent 5 years learning how to love the brother I chose while sitting across the table from the one I'd already lost. The room felt too quiet. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, a sound I'd never noticed before. Why didn't you say something? I asked. At the wedding, at the christening, Any of the 100 times we were alone for 2 minutes. Because I was a coward, she didn't flinch. Because saying it would have made it real, and real meant blowing up my marriage, your relationship with your brother, and the life we'd all built. I told myself it was nobler to bury it, that if I loved you, the most loving thing I could do was never let you know. That's not nobility, I said quietly. That's self-preservation dressed up as sacrifice. She exhaled sharply like I'd pressed a bruise. Maybe, but I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting Lily and Mark. And you didn't ask for this. You didn't ask me to carry a torch for 5 years while you fixed my furnace and played godfather to my daughter. We sat in silence. I wanted to be angry, but anger required a clean target, and Jenna was too honest for that. She wasn't defending herself. She was confessing. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. There's more. I looked at her. More than you wishing you'd married me. More than the whisper, she said. The reason I let it slip. The reason I called you that day, the reason my voice sounded hollow. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Mark and I have been in trouble for months, not the quiet, manageable trouble we've had before. Real trouble. Define real. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. A month ago, I found emails on his laptop. He's been talking to someone, a woman from his office, a junior agent in his commercial division. The emails weren't explicit, but they weren't nothing either. Late-night messages, inside jokes, the kind of intimacy that builds before anything physical happens. I confronted him. He said it was nothing. He said I was being paranoid. And then he said something that I've been carrying ever since. She turned around. He said, I'm not the only one in this marriage who settled. The air left my lungs. I stared at her. He knows. I don't think he knows about you specifically, but he senses something. He sensed it for years. He doesn't know what it is, but he knows I've been holding a part of myself back. And now, instead of asking why, he's decided to find someone who gives him the attention he thinks I'm giving someone else. Her voice cracked. So you see, David, it's not just a confession. It's a marriage falling apart while I'm standing in the middle of it, and the thing I whispered into the phone was the first honest thing I've said in months. I stood up then, crossing the room to stand beside her. Not too close, not yet. What do you want to do? She looked at me with wet eyes. I want to stop lying, but I don't know if that's even possible anymore. Mark is coming home early today. He texted me right before you got here. He said we need to talk. She swallowed. I think he's going to leave me, or I'm going to have to tell him the truth. Either way, this ends today. The front doorknob turned. We both froze. The door swung open and Mark stepped inside, his tie loosened, his face unreadable. He saw us standing together by the window, and his expression shifted into something I'd never seen on my brother before, a cold, quiet understanding. David, he said, not a greeting but an accusation. What are you doing here? Mark stood in the doorway with his keys still in his hand, looking from me to Jenna like a man who just walked into a room he'd been warned about. I'd seen my brother angry, frustrated, exhausted. I'd never seen him cold. This was cold. He didn't raise his voice. He just waited. Jenna spoke first, her voice steadier than I expected. I asked him to come. Did you? Mark set his keys on the entry table, a small, deliberate click. Asked him to come while I was at work. While the kids were at school. And you didn't think that required a conversation with me. It wasn't about you, Jenna said. The two of you standing in my living room alone, looking like the last scene of a movie I didn't audition for, and you're telling me it's not about me. I stepped forward. Mark, listen, something happened. On a phone call. She didn't plan it. I didn't plan it. But we needed to talk face to face because pretending nothing happened wasn't working anymore. Turned to me, and the look on his face was worse than anger. It was recognition, like he'd been waiting for this shoe to drop since the day he introduced us. What happened? Jenna took a breath. I forgot to hang up the phone Tuesday. I said something I shouldn't have said. He heard it. I said I should have married him. The words sat in the room like smoke. Mark didn't react, not at first. Then he laughed, a short, hollow sound. There it is. After 6 years, there it is. I knew. He shook his head. I knew something was there from the beginning, the way you looked at him, the way you laughed at his jokes, the way you'd find excuses to be wherever he was. Everybody saw it. My parents saw it. My friends saw it. I was the idiot who told myself I was imagining things. You weren't imagining things, Jenna said quietly, but I never acted on it, not once. Not a touch, not a word, not a single moment that crossed a line. Except this one, Mark said. The one where you told my brother you should have married him." Jenna didn't argue. She just stood there, arms folded tightly, taking the hit. I looked at my brother. "I didn't ask for this, and I didn't come here today to start something. I came because we needed to figure out what to do with a truth that wasn't supposed to exist." Mark turned to me. "What to do? You want to know what to do? Here's what you do. You walk out that door. You give me and my wife 5 minutes to talk without you in the room, and you wait." His voice cracked just slightly. "Because I'm not just losing a marriage here, I might be losing my brother." That hit harder than anything he could have said. I nodded once. "I'll be outside." I walked past him, past the keys on the table and the photos on the wall of their wedding day, and out onto the front porch. The door closed behind me. I stood by my truck and stared at the street and listened to the muffled sound of voices rising and falling inside. I couldn't make out words, just tones. Pain, accusation, maybe some kind of release. 20 minutes passed before the door opened again. It was Jenna. Her eyes were red, but she was calm. "He wants to talk to you." I went back inside. Mark was sitting on the couch now, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I sat in the chair across from him. Jenna stayed by the door. "We're separating," Mark said flatly. "Not because of what you heard, because of what's been true for a long time. The emails I sent, the distance I created, all of it. She loves you, maybe she always has, and I can't compete with a ghost I've been living beside for 6 years." He looked at me. "I'm not giving you my blessing. I'm not that evolved. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't see this coming. I just didn't want to admit it. I wanted to say something that would fix it. Something that would put the world back together. But there are moments when no sentence is strong enough to hold the weight of what's broken." I stayed with Mark for another hour that day after Jenna went to pack a bag for the kids. We didn't talk about the marriage or the confession. We talked about logistics. Who would tell our parents, what to say to Lily, how to divide the holidays. It was the most painful practical conversation I've ever had, and we both cried by the end of it. Not for the marriage, for the brotherhood we were about to lose. 3 weeks later, the divorce papers were filed. Mark moved into an apartment downtown. Jenna stayed in the house with Lily and her younger brother, a toddler named Caleb. I helped her move a bookshelf one Saturday, and when we were done, she made coffee and we sat on the back porch. She looked at me with something like hope, and I knew what she was going to ask before she asked it. "Do you think someday we could try? Not now. Not soon. But someday, the thing that was between us." I set my mug down. "I've thought about it every day since that Tuesday," I said. "And every day I come to the same answer. I can't. Not because I don't feel it, because I do. But if I become the man you left Mark for, even indirectly, even years from now, I lose my niece and nephew. I lose my parents' ability to sit in the same room without blame. I lose the last thread of my relationship with my brother. And you lose that too." Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes got wet. "So what do we do with it?" "We carry it," I said. "We carry it quietly, the way you carried it for 6 years. Except now you don't carry it alone. I'll be in your life. I'll be Lily's godfather. I'll show up for birthdays and emergencies. But we keep the door closed so the rest of the rooms don't burn down." She nodded slowly, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "That's the hardest thing anyone's ever asked me to do. It's the hardest thing I've ever asked myself to do." I left that afternoon, and for the first time since the whisper I felt something close to peace. Not the clean, weightless kind. The heavy kind that comes from finally telling the truth and paying the price for it. The central question of those 5 years had never been whether Jenna loved me. It was whether I could live with a love that required silence. I chose the silence, not out of fear. Out of the quiet, stubborn loyalty I'd been practicing long before I ever heard her voice through a dead receiver. And I think